Good afternoon. Welcome to this session, this solo session. I will be talking about a project called Future Library. It is a literary art project in Oslo, Norway. And I think they were going to show a video here. You're not going to show the video? Okay. They're not going to show the video, so I will be talking in illustrative language about the project. Hello, hello. Yep. So, my name is Sjon, as has already been said, and I am an Icelandic writer, writing in the Icelandic language, born in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland. And I started writing at a very, very young age. At the age of 15, I published my first collection of poetry. I did it myself, of course, because who would have taken on a 15-year-old poet? And I sold the book mostly on the bus from my neighborhood to the center of town. It was a 20-minute journey, and I just walked around the bus and said, would you like to buy a copy of my new book of poetry? And it was very difficult for people to say no. And it was quite a success. I sold all 100 copies. And that was the beginning of a journey that took me here to your country, to your city today, to this amazing festival. And I am very glad to have been asked to present this amazing project called Future Library. Future Library is the brainchild of a Scottish artist named Katie Patterson. She is born in Glasgow in 1981, and she studied in Scotland and in England. And she actually came to Iceland as a young woman looking for what to do in life. She went to an unemployment office in Glasgow, actually, and she filled out a questionnaire. And what the computer came up with was that she should work on a farm in Iceland. She had never even thought of going to Iceland, but she found this fantastic enough to actually obey the computer. So that was her first brush with Icelandic literature, culture, and especially landscape. One of the first artworks she made was based on the biggest glacier in Iceland, Vatnajökull. So what she did was that she recorded the sounds of the glacier, because the glacier is alive. The glacier is not a fixed, frozen thing. It is always melting a little bit here and there. It's responding to the effects of the climate. So you have like these murmurs, you have the rumble. The glacier is constantly speaking about its condition. So she recorded the voice of the glacier, and then she collected ice from the glacier. And when she came back to Scotland, she used the ice. This sounds incredible, but this is what she did. She used the ice to make LPs, records, like vinyl records. And these vinyl records had the sound of the glacier. So when you put the needle on the record and it started playing from the ice, the record melted as it played. And this is an artwork she does, I think, in 2010-11. So really before all the big discussion about the glaciers disappearing. So she made this amazing artwork about a glacier speaking its last words as it disappears. So this is Katie Patterson. Her imagination is incredible, and she likes to work with time and space. She, for example, has collected her ideas in a book, and one of the ideas, she's always getting ideas. Obviously, she's a good artist, and one of the ideas that she noted down. Some of the ideas will never be made. She knows it, but she has to write them. And for example, one of the most amazing ideas in that book is a place that only exists in moonlight. What is that? How is she going to create a place that only exists in moonlight? I don't know, but she's always getting these ideas. She has another amazing idea, which is that she worked with scientists, and she recreated the smell of space. We don't think that space has smell, but she worked with scientists, and she imagined a journey from Earth to the end of the solar system and beyond. And it turns out that the smell of space changes the further you go. And she created a candle. So when you light the candle, you're on Earth and you get the smells of Earth. And then you start your journey, and slowly you go into space through the smell of space. Yeah. So it's no wonder that when Katie was asked to do a project for a newly planned area in Oslo. There is a bay called Bjørnvika, and actually the most famous building in this bay, or by this bay, or by the sea, is the Oslo Opera House, which is architectural wonder. But when they kept working on the architectural ideas for this area, they decided to ask artists to make artworks specifically for this new place, and they called it the Slow Space Art Project. So it was about slowing time, living in time instead of just rushing around in this new area. And the idea that Katie came up with was simple on the paper. It was to start a library in 2014, a library that would grow for 100 years. And as she developed it, she came up with the idea that in the forest just outside Oslo, they would clear a space for new trees, and these new trees were planted and they started to grow in the year 2014. And as they grow for 100 years, each year an author, a poet, a novelist, a songwriter, someone working with words, contributes a manuscript to this library. But the big news about this library is not that it is a collection of books. It is the fact that the library will only be made open and available in the year 2114. So every year while the forest is growing back, the trees are growing, an author writes a new piece of literature, and what they tell you is that it can be from one word to as much as you can produce and wish to produce in 6 months. You get 6 months to write a new work of literature. And it is sealed in an envelope, and no one will see it until the year 2114. Then they will chop down the trees, and they will make paper from the trees, and this paper will be used to print the works of literature. 100 books. Some small, some big, we don't know. But because it's about nature and sustainability, something had to be done with the trees that were cut down to make space for the new trees. And the trees were taken from the clearing, and they were processed and made into boards. So in the new city library of Oslo, there is a room called the Silent Room. This is a room where you can go and contemplate, and you can take your time from whatever is going on in your life, and you can go into this room, and the room is paneled with the wood from the clearing. So even the trees that had to give way for the new trees, they are a part of the project. So you go into this room, and it's paneled with this beautiful wood. But in the room, there are 100 shelves. There are 100 shelves. So each year, when the author hands over his or her or their manuscript, the manuscript is first taken to the clearing in the woods, because it's taken to the place where the trees are growing, the trees that will become that book. And then the manuscripts are taken from there to the Silent Room, and the author places the manuscript into the wall, into the drawer in the wall, and it's sealed until the day comes. And I can tell you that it is really a global project. It will, in the end, have authors from, I don't know how many languages. There will be 100 manuscripts. But today, there are 9 writers who have been asked to contribute. And the first one was Margaret Atwood from Canada, who was the perfect first person to hand over a manuscript. She's been thinking very much about the future, as you know. Her Handmaid's Tale is one of her great successes in thinking into the future. But I think it was also a strong statement to ask a woman to start this library, because in so many cultures, women are the keepers of stories. And I'll just tell you about the authors who have who have contributed so far. So Margaret Atwood was first, then David Mitchell from the UK, then Sjon from Iceland, then Elif Shafak from Turkey, then there was Han Kang from Korea, then Karl Ove Knausgård, who is Norwegian and writes in Norwegian. Han Kang obviously writes in Korean, and Elif writes in Turkish. Ocean Wang came from the United States. He's a Vietnamese, of Vietnamese origin, but writes in English. So we don't know what he did. Did he write in Vietnamese and English? We don't know. And then there is Tsitsi Tankaremka from Zimbabwe. She's the last one to hand over her script. And this year, Judith Shalansky from Germany will join the 8 of us. So what do you do when you're asked to write something that will only be read in 100 years? It sounded like a fun idea when I said yes to it. I was quite quick to say yes. And I had met Katie Patterson at a literature festival in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And she was just going around, and and then she came to a table where I was sitting, and she put a small brochure on the table and said, "Oh, my name is Katie Patterson. I'm a visual artist, and I'm working on this project, and yeah, just want you to take a look at this." And I just took a look at it when I got back to Iceland, and I thought, wow, what an amazing project. And then soon after, it was announced that Margaret Atwood would be the first. And then the next year, it was announced that David Mitchell had been asked to be the second. And he had also been in Copenhagen. And Margaret Atwood had also been in Copenhagen. And nobody knew that this was a secret meeting between Katie Patterson and Margaret Atwood about the project. And then so Margaret Atwood was there, David Mitchell was there. And then I thought, I was there too. Are they not going to talk to me? But a year later, they actually did. And I said yes. And then I started thinking about what this really means. And the freedom of writing anything from one word to as much as you can write in 6 months is a bad idea for an author. It's too much freedom. So I started looking at what were the restrictions of this. And obviously, the biggest restriction was that you would never get a response to your writing. And I'm a writer who, from the beginning, has always been quite cool about readers and reception and sales and things like that. I always thought, I just write it. The world can do whatever it wants with it. But as I was working on the text, and of course I cannot tell you anything about the text, that is the nature of the game. The books remain secret until 2114. No one will read these books. No one. And a big part of us will be gone from the planet when the library is printed and finds its readers. So as I was working on my secret text, I slowly became aware of how much an unseen, invisible, unnamed reader is always with me when I write. Even though I'm not writing to please anyone in particular, I could sense that there was always with me someone I was speaking to. No matter who it was, there is always someone. You are all here now. So it would be like sitting in a room, giving this talk to the wall, It is lonely. And slowly I realized that obviously literature was given to the human being for correspondence, for a dialogue, for sharing the experience of being alive and on this planet and coming from a place and telling news of that place to people from other places. So I sensed a strong sense of, I had a strong sense of loneliness as I sat there writing my text. And I realized also that even though I don't have particular readers in mind, there were little things in the text where I thought, oh, it would be nice to know what this friend of mine would think of this, because I know that she is interested in these kind of things, Would she say, that's good, Sjon, or you could have done it a little bit better, Sjon, So there was this emptiness in the process of writing, but obviously the promise of readers in 2114. And I think I am not giving away anything about how writers think, but I think all writers hope to be read in the far future. We enjoy being read in the moment, but of course we all secretly hope that our texts will survive us maybe not for 3,000 years or 4,000 years, not even 400 years, but maybe some years after we're gone, people will keep reading and thinking about what we left behind. So obviously the promise of readers in 2114 is a nice promise to a writer. But I was also faced with another question, and I was really surprised about how many questions this task that I thought was going to be just fun, how many existentialist questions were built into this request and into the project. And that is really the amazing thing about Future Library. It's like a machine when it comes to thinking about writing and the relationship we have to writing, to storytelling, to sharing our experiences, to be living with these amazing creatures called trees. All of these deep existential questions are built into this project. And for someone who comes from a country that has 371,000 speakers, I repeat, because I am in India, I have to repeat because I don't think you understand small numbers. 371,000 people speak Icelandic. And it is, of course, a vulnerable language in the age of English and in the age of social media, in the age of technologies being more and more audio-driven. There is not much space for languages spoken by few. So I realized that by writing my text in Icelandic, I can tell you as much. It's written in Icelandic. It made me realize that in 2114, I cannot be sure that the Icelandic I am writing today will be spoken or read or even understood in 100 years. Because the language is changing rapidly, and their language is a vulnerable language because of the small number of speakers. So I thought, well, at least it will be a strange document with these strange words, and it will be like this little mystery. And if I'm lucky, they will find like a 100-year-old woman in the cellars of the University of Cologne in Germany who actually knows a little bit about this language, and she can make an attempt at translating this old text in a strange ancient language. But somehow I thought I have to send my language into the future. I have to put it to test. So that was the deepest existential question I faced. So this is my personal experience of actually writing the text. But then, as I said, around the whole project, around the handing over of the manuscript, there is this ritual. So each year, a writer, an author, a poet arrives in the city of Oslo with the precious manuscript, and you're taken outside Oslo into the forest, and you walk a path into the forest to the clearing, and there you meet the trees. When I was there in 2017. The trees, they were this big. They were this big. They like this, tiny little creatures, tiny little tree babies, you know. And they were so sweet and fragile, and you had to be careful not to step on them, you know. Of course, in Iceland, we are used to small trees. We have almost no trees in Iceland. You know, there is this joke in Iceland that if you get lost in an Icelandic forest, you just stand up, you know. And so I was taken to meet the trees. And the forester who is in charge of that forest outside Oslo, he talks about the trees. He talks about how they're doing, how they have survived through the winter. So they are really seen as living partners in this project. They're living partners. I returned last summer because last summer was the year of the opening of the silent room. So some of us were invited back to go into the silent room and actually place our manuscripts in the drawers. And so you go and you walk down this path, you meet the trees. And maybe because Margaret Atwood was the first author to walk that path, I became very much aware that I was literally walking in her footsteps. And I was literally walking in the footsteps of David Mitchell, who had gone there the year before me. So what they have made is a path that 100 writers will walk over 100 years. And this is something that happens in reality, while it is also an amazing metaphor for how literature continues. And the year after, Han Kang came there, and every author I have spoken to who have done this has been deeply touched by the fact that you know that you are walking in the footsteps of writers who have gone before you, and you sense you sense the presence of the people who will come later. Then, of course, there is the fact that those of us, the pioneers, the first generation of writers, will be gone in the year 2114. I actually talked to Margaret Atwood, and we agreed that we are going to do our best to be there. But, you know, we'll see. Technology, you know, medicine, I don't know. Magic, you know, maybe, you know, in Iceland, you know, if you help a supernatural being in need, if you come across a supernatural being that is stuck somehow in the moor or has beached and is trying to get back into the ocean, if you help them, they can grant you eternal life if they're generous that day. So let's see what happens to Margaret Atwood and me. But there is something beautiful about this journey through the woods, down this path that 100 writers will walk. And I must say I'm also very glad that the project only started in 2014, because let's say it had started in 1974, and I would have been asked to come there in 2017. I would have been walking in the footsteps of such giants of literature that I would have felt infinitely small, you know. And I'm not saying that this will happen to the people coming after us. Actually, David Mitchell said that when he was asked to be the second author, he said that his biggest fear was that he would be sandwiched between two amazing authors, you know. He would be like the failed second try. But of course, he is an amazing author, and I was privileged to be the next one after him. And I felt like I was sandwiched between two great authors by being put between David Mitchell and Elif Shafak, you know. So the trees are growing, And when I came in 2017, the babies, they had grown like this. They were growing quite fast. And the forester told us that actually this winter, the root system had secured itself. So it's so beautiful to get news of the trees. The root system had secured itself. So that was the big news that year of the trees, you know. Yes, they're gonna make it and they're gonna keep growing. So this is the Future Library, this amazing project in Norway. And already there are writers from 3 continents, 6 languages, and this is obviously a part of the project. It's going to be representative of human culture on this globe. But then there is the big aspect to what is going on here. And that is how from the moment Katie imagined it, its nature has been changing. When Margaret Atwood talked about it in 2014, she talked about how much hope was in the project. Hope for literature, for storytelling, for books. She said, it's amazing that somebody actually believes that in 100 years people will still be reading, that they will still be wanting books. And then last year, all the discussion was about time, about how we move in time, because we have become aware of time because of the climate emergency. Everything is speeding up. Everything is moving at a different pace. And of course, with the pandemic, we were made extremely aware of time and our vulnerability. And one of the things that Anne Beate Hovind, who is the producer of the project, she's really the woman who made it possible, because she is the one who convinced the City Council of Oslo and the Oslo City Library and the financiers that this should actually be made real. And one of the things that she has been talking about, and the term that she's used to describe what this project is that she says it belongs to what in Europe is called cathedral thinking. And it's called cathedral thinking because the great cathedrals of Europe were built over generations. And this is thinking that I know is not new to you here in this amazing culture, where things have been built over centuries and nurtured by generations after generations. But it is something that we were we had forgotten in our part of the world. So the Future Library becomes a symbol, a metaphor of the combined effort we need to make to secure our survival and a future. And I think that is going to be one of the main themes we will be talking about with when we talk about the Future Library in the coming years. That it should be an encouraging project. It encourages us to believe that we can work across generations and that we must work across generations for our culture and for our survival as beings. And we can only do it in dialogue with natural beings, such as trees. And of course, we know that where there is a tree, there is a world. So we are not only doing this in collaboration with the trees, we're doing it in collaboration with the soil, we're doing it in collaboration with every creature in the soil, we're doing it in collaboration with the birds in that forest. So we are placing man inside the ecological process, and that's where the human being belongs. So we can only do this with nature, and over generations. So this is my solo talk on the future library. And as I said, I hope that over the coming years we will see more people from various parts of the planet, from various cultures, various languages, vulnerable communities, languages that do not automatically belong to world literature in the minds of those who think they have a grasp of what world literature is and even think they have a command over it, because world literature is made up of every language, every storyteller there is on this planet. So I'm very happy to be one of the first in this project, and so far I am I represent the language that is spoken by the smallest group of people, because our survival is a collaborative effort. So this is the future library.